Welcome back to TruthIsWhatMatters.com with my very special guest Harold McCarthy and my co-host Ray. And we're going to talk a little bit about metrics are riddles. Harold?
Radiometrics are riddles.
Radiometrics are riddles.
I thought you got that.
I practice before this, and as soon as the light goes on, I I forgot. Radiometrics are riddles.
That's right.
Riddles.
That's
Riddles.
What you call alliteration. You
It's too much Batman, the Riddler, and everything else.
Right.
You know?
Remember, I was the head of the English department.
Absolutely, yes. I should have known better.
Yeah, and so I had, you remember the first point was that the fossil column is false. You remember, like F and F?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
not too many F's here. This is a family program.
Okay, we try to keep it right. And then they remember the next one was hominids are a hoax.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I discuss this with the class, usually they say, yeah, I think you probably got a point there, Mr. McCarthy. And I'd say, well, go to your science teachers, Mr. Hall and Mr. Buchanan and others, and ask them, where are these transitional forms? Where is the evidence? And a few days later, I'd say, what did they say? And they'd say, well, you just have to accept it. And I would say, well, and you're saying that I'm crazy because I accept an intelligent creator, God, and you're asked to accept a theory or really just an hypothesis, and you don't have any evidence for it at all? Oh, but Dr. Mr. You're forgetting. There's dating, carbon-14 dating, and there's proof. There's evidence that the universe is billions of years old, and the solar system is billions of years old. In fact, the general evolutionary view now is that the universe is about 17 billion years old, I think. And the solar system is about probably 4.5 billion years old. So what do you say about that? Isn't that proof? So I would come up with my third alliteration, not that fossil column is false anymore, or that hominids are a hoax, but radiometrics are riddled, because the measuring by radiation, radiometrics. Now that's considered to be absolute fact, Oh yes, absolute fact. So so we would discuss this, and we would talk about carbon-14 dating. Now, carbon-14 dating is very interesting. Carbon-14 half-life is from carbon-14 to carbon-12 is 5,720 years. Now that is something that is sort of within the comprehension and understanding of a human being. 5,720 years. So it basically goes back to what I believe is the time of biblical flood and within the time of biblical creation. As I see it, and as the Bible seems to present it as far as I can see. Anyway, the interesting thing is that carbon-14 dating, though, can only be used in measuring the age of living things, either animal or vegetable. Because once a living thing dies, it ceases to ingest carbon-14 radiation. And so then you can measure approximately how old it is, hopefully. And there is quite a bit of validity, as far as I can see, to carbon-14 dating. It's interesting, too, that with carbon-14 dating, you can actually compare the dates you arrive at through measuring the carbon-14 that is left in a substance by calibrating it with other things that we know the dates of from other means. For instance, you can go by the number of rings in trees. And the oldest living botanical thing we know of is a pine cone tree in California, which is about 4,500 years old.
It's a redwood, right?
No, it's different. Yes, but close, I think. And so you can actually tell from other means quite conclusively, approximately, how old that tree is. You can also date things by other calibrations, such as the coffins in Egypt, and you can tell too from other archaeological digs, things that are found, like the pottery and ceramics, vases and so on. Archaeologists are able to tell within probably 50 or 100 years from certain types of lamps just what period of history they belong to. And so you can calibrate by other means and confirm and give good evidence for the carbon-14 dating in many cases. There are some problems. This is where radiometrics gets riddled in the case of carbon-14 dating. One of the problems, as I understand it, with carbon-14 dating is that it's often difficult to tell exactly what the mother lode, as they call it, the original living thing, whether vegetation like trees and so on, or animal bones and so on, how much carbon-14 they'd ingested originally when they died, how much was in there when they died, and ceased to ingest carbon-14. The other problem is that it's very difficult to tell whether that mother lode has been affected in some way. That is, has it been placed near some other radioactive substance, and therefore got carbon-14 brought into it by another means than just when it was living. And then another problem is, was the carbon-14 leached out of it in some way? For instance, you can have radioactive substances leached out of a substance by being put in water and put in hot water and steam and this sort of thing. And this also comes into the other types of radiometric dating. So, and they've found that there are variables in the rates that different living substances ingested or still ingest carbon-14. It was thought that it was all the same. Kind of interesting that there seems to be an extremely radical change in the rate of ingestion of carbon-14 at about 2500 BC, which I take to be the date of the Noahic flood, the worldwide flood, as recorded in the scripture. Quite a drastic change there, and I think that may have to do with the whole business of the environment of Earth changing at that time. Possibly there was a vapor or water canopy around the Earth that protected it from the living things from carbon-14 ingestion before the flood, that ceased to exist after the flood. But those are other considerations. But anyway, carbon-14 can be fairly valid under a lot of circumstances, and it's within the range of human understanding. But when you come to the dating of non-living things, rocks and minerals, you're getting into a sphere of radiometrics that is really riddled. Common ways to date rocks and non-living substances is through what's known as the uranium-lead decomposition process. Now, and also through change from potassium to argon and this sort of thing. Now, the problem with this kind of dating is that the half-life of these substances is not 5,720 years as it is with carbon dating, but it's billions of years. And so this gets into a realm of understanding that is beyond our comprehension, really. It's sort of almost, to begin with, in almost a theoretical sphere of understanding. Accept it, and I would say, well, and you're saying that I'm crazy because I accept an intelligent creator, God, and you're asked to accept a theory or really just an hypothesis, and you don't have any evidence for it at all. Oh, but Dr. Mr. McCarthy.
Welcome back to TruthIsWhatMatters.com with my very special guest Harold McCarthy and my co-host Ray. And we're going to talk a little bit about metrics are riddles. Harold?
Radiometrics are riddles.
Radiometrics are riddles.
I thought you got that.
You know, I practice before this, and as soon as the light goes on, I I forgot. Radiometrics are riddles.
That's right.
Riddles.
That's
Riddles.
what you call alliteration. You
That's too much Batman, the Riddler, and everything else.
Right.
You know?
Remember, I was the head of the English department.
Absolutely, yes. I should know better.
Yeah, and so I had, you remember the first point was that the fossil column is false. You remember, like F and F? And then,
not too many F's here. This is a family program.
Okay, we're trying to keep it right. And then they remember the next one was hominids are a hoax. And so when I discuss this with the class, usually they say, yeah, I think you probably got a point there, Mr. McCarthy. And I'd say, well, go to your science teachers, Mr. Hall and Mr. Buchanan and others, and ask them, where are these transitional forms? Where is the evidence? And a few days later, I'd say, what did they say? And they'd say, well, you just have to accept